I'd been coming to the corner cafe for months, but it wasn't really about the coffee. The place was small, with a crooked clock that always ran 10 minutes slow, and a window that fogged up even when it wasn't raining. I sat at the same table near the back, halfway hidden by a potted plant that had started to wilt. I liked the quiet of it. No one really noticed me there. Except her. She wasn't supposed to belong to that cafe any more than I did. She had the kind of presence that made the room straighten itself. Not loud, not dramatic, just composed in a way that felt practiced. She was in her mid-40s, I guessed, and always dressed like she had somewhere better to be afterward. Neat coat, hair tied back in a loose knot, a wedding ring that caught the light when she reached for her cup. The first time she spoke to me, it wasn't even meant as anything. I was fumbling for change at the counter, and she stepped aside, waiting. "You always order the same thing," she said, a little smile forming, as if she'd been keeping track. I laughed too quickly, like I'd been caught. "Habit," I said. "Easier not to think about it. Black coffee, no sugar," she said, nodding toward my cup when it came. "That's not habit. That's stubbornness." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just smiled and stepped aside. She stayed by the counter, stirring her tea even though she hadn't added anything to it. After that, we kept running into each other. Not every day, but enough that I noticed when she wasn't there. A glance exchanged over the rim of a cup. A quick remark about the weather. Once, she asked what I was reading and leaned a little closer than necessary to see the title. It was nothing. And yet it wasn't. The thing is, my days were mostly empty around the edges. I had my job, assistant work at a logistics office, typing in numbers until they blurred. Evenings stretched long, quiet. I had messages drafted on my phone I never sent, people I thought about reaching out to but didn't. Sometimes I'd catch myself staring at the cursor on the screen like it was waiting for me to prove I had someone to talk to. But then she'd be there again, and it felt like the clock reset. One morning, she sat down at the table next to mine. Close enough that our coats brushed when she set hers on the back of the chair. I noticed her hands before anything else. Long fingers, nails short and clean, a thin gold bracelet that slid down her wrist when she reached for her cup. She caught me looking and didn't pull away. "You're quieter than most people your age," she said finally. I almost laughed. "That's supposed to be good or bad?" She shrugged, eyes on her tea. "Depends on who's listening." The silence stretched, but it wasn't uncomfortable. Just waiting. She gathered her things before I did, wrapping her scarf loosely, leaving the faint smell of perfume in the air. She didn't say goodbye, just placed her empty cup on the counter and left. I thought that was it, until my phone buzzed a few minutes later. A message from a number I didn't recognize. "One touch, and you'll be mine." I stared at the screen, heart knocking louder than the cafe clock. How had she even gotten my number? And what exactly did she mean? The message sat on my phone all day. I must have opened it a dozen times, reading the words as if they might change on their own. No name, no follow-up, nothing. Just that one line. When I saw her again, 2 days later, she didn't mention it. She acted like nothing had happened, ordered her tea, sat near the window, eyes on the street outside. I thought maybe I'd imagined it. Maybe the number belonged to someone else entirely. But then she glanced my way, and I knew. I don't know why I walked over. I never did that before. "Mind if I sit?" I asked, already pulling out the chair across from her. She raised an eyebrow but didn't object. "Bold move for someone who doesn't say much." I tried to smile. "I'm working on it." We sat in a quiet that wasn't empty. The clink of cups, the hiss of the espresso machine, the scrape of chairs around us, none of it reached the little circle of stillness at our table. She set her tea down. "You remind me of my son a little." That caught me off guard. I hadn't expected her to put it in those terms. "He's about your age. In grad school now. Talks too fast when he's nervous. But sometimes, when he's tired, he gets this faraway look, like he's already living somewhere else." She tilted her head at me. "You've got that same look." I didn't know what to do with that comparison. It landed somewhere between comfort and warning. I don't think that's a compliment, I said finally, trying to keep it light. Her smile was small, tired. Maybe it's not. The weight of it settled in. She was my boss's wife. That was the unspoken fact running under everything. Not just older. Not just married. Tied to the very place I worked, where every hallway suddenly felt like a line I shouldn't cross. I imagined what it would look like from the outside, me leaning across this table, her laughing at something I said. To anyone else, it would seem harmless. Ordinary. But I felt the edges of it sharp against my ribs. She shifted in her seat, reaching for the sugar even though she never used it. A distraction? I noticed her hands again, how steady they were, how deliberate. She tapped the spoon against the rim of her cup, and the sound seemed louder than it should have been. You're thinking too hard, she said, almost teasing. Maybe. I hesitated. I just don't want to misunderstand. Her eyes lifted to mine, holding them longer than necessary. Maybe you already understand. Neither of us spoke after that. The silence stretched, but it was threaded with something I couldn't name. When she finally stood, she reached for her scarf the way she always did, slow, precise. But as she passed, she rested her hand lightly on my shoulder. Just a brush, nothing anyone else would notice. I sat frozen long after she left, the warmth of her touch lingering like a secret I wasn't sure I wanted. The next time wasn't planned. I left work late, shoulders stiff from hours at the desk, and found myself walking past the cafe. I hadn't even meant to stop, but the lights were still on, glowing against the dark street. Through the window, she was there. Alone, coat draped over the back of her chair, a book open in her hands. I stood outside longer than I should have, debating. Then she looked up, as if she'd felt me there, and raised a hand in a small wave. That was all it took. Inside, it was quieter than usual. Just her, me, and the barista wiping down counters, bored. You're working late? She asked when I sat down across from her. Always, I said, rubbing my neck. You. She closed the book gently, placing it on the table. Sometimes it's easier not to go straight home. I didn't ask why. I didn't need to. For a while, we just sat there. She stirred her tea, even though it was almost gone. I traced the rim of my cup with a finger. Silence stretched and bent, almost too much, until she broke it. You ever feel like you're waiting for something, but you don't even know what? Her voice was softer than usual, as if she wasn't sure she wanted me to hear. Yeah, I said before I could stop myself. All the time. She looked at me then, really looked, and it was like the air thinned out between us. I wanted to say more, something honest, reckless, but the bell over the door jingled. A man in a suit walked in. One of the managers from the office. My stomach dropped. He ordered quickly, barely glancing our way, but the moment was gone. She leaned back, folding her arms, eyes sliding away from mine. I swallowed hard. We should, I know. Her interruption was quick, almost sharp. Then she softened. Don't worry. He didn't notice. Still, the shift lingered. She tapped her fingers against her cup, restless. I mirrored her without meaning to, both of us fidgeting like teenagers caught in the wrong place. The manager left with his coffee. The door closed, and the silence swelled back, heavier now. Her eyes met mine again. Not steady this time, but searching. Questioning. I wanted to reach across the table. Just to touch her hand. Just to see if it would ground me instead of spinning me further. My fingers twitched against the wood, but I stopped myself. She must have noticed. She leaned forward, close enough that her scarf brushed the edge of my sleeve. For a second, the world shrank down to just that space, her breath warm, my heart loud in my ears. Careful, she whispered, almost like a warning, almost like an invitation. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. And then she pulled back. Slowly. Deliberately. Gathering her coat, slipping her arms through the sleeves as if nothing had happened at all. See you, she said, quiet, eyes not quite meeting mine. I sat there long after she left, hands still flat on the table where hers could have been. It happened after work, on a gray evening when the streets were slick with rain. I was walking home, collar pulled up against the wind, when I saw her across the street. She was standing under a lamppost, fumbling with her umbrella that had flipped inside out. I crossed before I could think. "Terrible design," I said, taking it gently from her hands. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. She laughed, small, resigned. "Or maybe I just don't know how to handle it." We ended up walking together, sharing the shelter of my jacket hood when I couldn't fix the umbrella. Close enough that our shoulders brushed with each step. Neither of us moved away. "You always walk home this way?" she asked. "Most nights." She nodded, pulling her scarf tighter. "I used to. Years ago. Before life got complicated." The word hung there, heavier than the rain. We reached a small park, the shortcut I usually took. She followed me without asking, heels clicking against the wet pavement. At the bench near the fountain, she stopped. "Let's sit. Just for a minute." The water gurgled quietly, rain tapping the surface. The world felt folded in, like no one else existed. She leaned forward, elbows on her knees, staring at the ripples. "You know, I wasn't supposed to notice you." My throat tightened. "Notice me how?" Her mouth curved, but not into a smile. "You asked too many questions." We sat in silence again. My hands twisted together in my lap, restless. I wanted to reach for her, to anchor myself, but I didn't. Finally she said, "I can't decide if you remind me of who I was, or who I'm afraid of becoming." I didn't answer right away. The words cut too close. "I don't want to be just." I stopped. The confession pushed at my chest, but I couldn't shape it. "Forget it." "No," she said softly. "Say it. I don't want to be just someone you pass the time with." Her gaze lifted then, steady, sharp, and unbearably kind all at once. My chest felt raw under it. "You're not," she said, barely above a whisper. "That's the problem." The rain slowed, leaving only the fountain's trickle. My heart beat in the space between us, too loud, too fast. She reached out, fingertips brushing the back of my hand. Just the lightest touch. My skin burned under it. I turned my palm upward, instinctive, wanting her hand in mine. But she pulled back, slowly, like she was untangling herself from something dangerous. She tucked her hands under her coat. The silence after that was unbearable. I swallowed hard. "Do you regret it already?" I asked. Her eyes met mine, steady but unreadable. "Do you?" she replied. The question hung there, unclaimed, as the rain started again. The week after the park, she disappeared. No cafe. No glimpses across the street. No reason. At first, I thought it was timing. That I'd just missed her. I kept showing up, same table, same bitter coffee cooling in front of me. But every day, the seat by the window stayed empty. By the fourth day, I stopped pretending it was coincidence. At work, I overheard something. Two of the older staff whispering in the break room. Words I wasn't meant to catch. "She's back at her sister's for a while." Something about the son visiting. "Divorce papers, maybe?" The tone was hushed, careful, like it was a subject that cut close. Divorce. The word landed in me like a stone, sending ripples out in directions I didn't know how to follow. I didn't know if it explained her absence, or if it explained everything. That night, I pulled my phone out more times than I could count. I opened the last message she'd sent, stared at the line until the letters blurred. "One touch, and you'll be mine." I typed responses. Deleted them. Typed again. "Are you okay? Do you want to talk? Where are you?" Every version looked wrong. Too small for what I meant. Too large for what I should say. In the end, I didn't send any of them. The following Friday, I walked past the cafe without going in. For the first time, it felt like a room I wasn't allowed inside anymore. Instead, I found myself circling the park where we'd last sat. The bench by the fountain was wet with rain again. Empty. I stood there a long time, staring at it, like maybe if I stayed long enough she'd appear, umbrella crooked, scarf slipping loose. But the park stayed quiet. I thought about what she'd said that night. "You're not just someone I pass the time with." That's the problem. It should have given me hope. Instead, it felt like a door halfway open, halfway closed, an invitation and a warning at once. By the time I got home, I was exhausted. Not from walking. From holding on to something that had nowhere to go. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in my hand, blank message box open. I stared at the cursor blinking, like it was daring me to be brave. To finish the sentence life had started. But I didn't type this time. I just closed the app, set the phone face down on the nightstand, and sat there in the dim light of my room. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused. Like life forgot to finish the sentence. And I couldn't tell if I was supposed to write the ending myself, or wait for her to. It was late when I saw her again. Not at the cafe, not at the park. At the grocery store, of all places. Fluorescent lights, half-empty shelves, the hum of a cooler in the background. Ordinary in every way except for the fact that she was standing there, hair loose, no coat, staring at a row of apples like she couldn't tell them apart. I almost walked past. Pretended I hadn't seen. But my cart slowed on its own, wheels squeaking. She noticed. Of course she did. Her face shifted, surprise first, then something softer, something careful. "You've been quiet," she said. "So have you." We stood there between fruit and fluorescent buzz. Neither of us moved closer, neither of us left. She sighed, adjusting the strap of her bag. "Things got messy." I nodded, though I didn't know what that meant. Divorce, maybe? Or something else. I figured. Her eyes flicked up, sharp for a second. "What did you figure?" "That maybe you didn't want me around anymore." The words slipped out too quickly. I wished I could grab them back, fold them up, hide them somewhere safe. She shook her head slow. "It wasn't that." A pause. "It was never that." Silence again. The kind that presses against your ribs. I leaned on the cart, knuckles white. "Then what is this?" "Because I don't know how to stand here, talk like it doesn't matter." "It does." She looked down, thumb brushing the edge of a plastic bag, tracing it over and over. "You're too young for this weight." "Maybe. But it's mine anyway." Her laugh was soft, almost sad. "You sound older than you are." "And you sound tired," I said. That caught her. Her eyes lifted, wide, then narrowed as if she wanted to deflect, but didn't. She let the words hang unchallenged. "I don't want to hurt you," she said finally. "You already did," I answered. Not angry. Just true. By leaving without a word. Her hand hovered near mine on the cart handle, so close I felt the warmth before the touch. She didn't close the gap. Neither did I. Instead, she whispered, "I thought disappearing would be kinder." "Kinder to who?" The question landed harder than I meant. She flinched, but didn't look away. We stayed like that, apples in front of us, carts abandoned, the rest of the world moving around unnoticed. Then she did something small, almost nothing. She reached over and straightened the sleeve of my jacket, smoothing it down like it mattered. The gesture broke me more than any kiss would have. I let out a shaky breath. "So what now?" Her hand lingered a second longer before slipping away. She gave me the smallest smile, fragile at the edges. "No," she said, voice low but steady. "We just say, okay." And for the first time, it felt like enough. Coffee at 8:47, the same seat near the window. A voice once teased, "Black coffee, no sugar, that's not habit, that's stubbornness." That voice hasn't left my head since. There was the park bench, the rain, the question neither of us answered. The hand that brushed mine. The silence that said more than words. Now it's late, the aisle of a grocery store, and the truth is closer than ever. A sleeve straightened. A smile too fragile to last. And the question still hanging between us, do you? The answer is right there. But if I say it, nothing will be the same again.